In 1985, a plane bound for New York City is experiencing heavy turbulence. A terrified young woman turns to the man in the seat next to hers and asks if she can hold on to his arm. The man reassures her and tries to calm her down by telling her not to worry. The plane wasn't going to go down in his opinion. "How do you know?" she said. "Because I'm under federal indictment. The government need me in New York for the trial and they always get what they want, so don't worry, this plane's not going down." The man's name was Michael Franzese, a capo regime in the Colombo crime family. In the classic mob movie Goodfellas, Henry Hill states that as far back as he could remember he always wanted to be a gangster. Well, for Michael Franzese that wasn't the case. Even though his father Sonny Franzese was the Colombo crime family underboss at that time, Michael had no intention of pursuing a life in the mafia. His ambition instead as a young man was to enter the medical profession. He even attended medical school before joining the mob. He was actually enrolled in a medical school at a university based in Long Island. That's probably a pretty unique story. I doubt there's too many mob guys who've dabbled in medicine before joining the ranks of the mafia, so that's pretty cool. Sonny Franzese wound up serving a 50-year sentence for bank robbery, which is a length of time that's pretty much unheard of for a crime such as bank robbery. After his father's incarceration, Joe Colombo, the head of the Colombo crime family, took Michael under his wing and began introducing him to more and more of the guys his father had worked with. He eventually lost interest in his medical studies, and he wanted to help his father by making money for the family, meaning both the Franzese family and the Colombos. If he could make enough money on the outside, he could hire the best lawyers for his father's appeal, and it's gonna maybe help get his father out of a 50-year sentence, which is to this day what they believe in the Franzese family. The general theory is that Sonny Franzese was framed for something he didn't. Well, of course he didn't commit it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be saying he was framed. Kind of gives it away. But yeah, so Michael Franzese was like, "Listen, my dad didn't do anything, and even if he did, 50 years, how do they get 50 years for bank robbery?" So Michael's like, "I need to make some money so I can hire the best team of lawyers around so they can help with his appeal and we can prove his innocence." So somewhere around 1972 or 1973, Sonny Franzese proposed Michael to the Colombos for membership, which makes it kind of sound like it was a gym. It wasn't a gym, it was the mafia, so we'll just be clear on that. Due to the fact that his father had proposed him for membership, Michael was able to skip the first stage of the mafia hierarchy. Usually you start out as an associate, then you become a recruit, from there you become a soldier, and then if you manage to get any higher than that, you could, get as high as like a capo regime, otherwise known as captain or capo. That basically is like a street boss, so you would control the recruits and they would report to you, the soldiers would report to the recruits, and so on and so forth down the ladder. So after paying his dues both as a recruit and as a soldier, Michael became a made man on Halloween night 1975. He was a substantial earner for the Colombos. From a young age he had a head for business and always had a legitimate business on the side of what he was doing. So that I don't know how this guy ever had time for sleep. He was running legitimate businesses, he had car dealerships, I think he had a Mazda car dealership at one point, which is why in his early days as a recruit he would always have a nice car because he was in the car business. So he would go to Brooklyn or to Long Island and pick people up, and he would go to the social clubs in Brooklyn, and basically you would just have to hang out and see, just listen, keep your eyes and ears open, watch what's going on, try and learn and absorb the environment, and be ready to be on call if anyone needs you for any favours. So basically he would be called upon usually to drive the higher ups around because he always had like a really nice car. A lot of the time he wouldn't even be allowed to drive because his kind of bosses at the time, they would want to be the ones being like seen driving this really nice car, so he would have to get in the back of his own car, kind of seemingly not doing anything, but really he's taking everything in and he's being on call. After living life as a made man for 5 years, Michael was promoted again, this time to the rank of capo regime. Franzese wouldn't even turn 30 until the following year in 1981, making him one of the youngest mafia captains in history. His biggest money-making scheme for the Colombos involved defrauding the government out of profit made from the gas business. He had multiple gas stations on the payroll who were benefiting from the scheme, and before long the operation was earning up to $10 million per week. So of course not all that money went straight to Michael Franzese. 2 million had to be kicked straight away up the ladder to the Colombo bosses. Then his guys had to be well paid so that they remain loyal. You know, if they're taking risks as well with their freedom, you need to compensate them well for it. Now, I'd love to explain how the scam worked. The problem is, I've watched multiple videos of Franzese explaining the nuts and bolts of how it went down. Problem is, I don't have a head for numbers in the slightest. A couple of years ago, my mum tried to teach me how to do Sudoku. My brain just sort of shut down. I don't know what happened, didn't understand it at all. What I've done to remedy this is I've posted a link in the description where you can learn about the operation and this gasoline scam by somebody who understands both mathematics and criminality. What I can tell you, however, is that everything went smoothly for 7 or 8 years, but all good things come to an end at some point, and eventually Franzese fell victim to the classic wiretapped conversation. Ironically, this was a conversation he wasn't even a part of. He wasn't in the same room. He wasn't even a part of the conversation on the other end of the phone. Problem is, his name was brought up so many times that he was identified clearly as like one of the spearheads of the whole scheme. He was charged with racketeering and prosecuted by former New York mayor, a formidable lawyer by the name of Rudy Giuliani. Now, as you can see by this photo, he's standing up there like a man. He's like, listen, this is what I've got to deal with. I'm going to speak in my defense. I've got my legal team. I've got a nice suit on. Let's deal with this, is what we got to do today. Now, replace him with me in the same situation. There's no way I'd look like this in the photo. Probably wouldn't hide my emotions as well as this. I'd be a little bit more transparent when it comes to the fear. I'd probably look a little bit more something like this. After taking a plea deal, Franzese was found guilty, and considering the circumstances, he receives a light sentence of 10 years. Now, to most people, that's like a horrible sound. If you hear a judge saying 10 years and then smashing that fucking hammer down, you know, that's not a good sight to hear, or thing to hear, rather. You can't hear sights. However, Franzese was facing like 300 years in federal prison, 200 years, 150 years. Like, he was facing the type of sentences where Dracula would shit his pants. He'd be able to do it because they can live, thousands of years, Draculas and stuff, but, So considering the worst case scenario of 300 years or something, 150 years, whatever it was, I think we should just take a small moment to applaud the Franzese legal team. After serving 6 of the 10 years, Franzese was released on parole. However, in an unfortunate twist of fate, he was only out for just over a year, and he was convicted of a parole violation and sentenced to a further 2 years. In addition to that, he was placed in solitary confinement due to his consistent refusal to turn informant. He wouldn't give anyone up. He said enough to, sort of admit to his crimes and take a plea deal, but he didn't mention names. He didn't want to implicate anyone in something that could be used against them. On top of the solitary confinement, they also used to move him from prison to prison just as he was getting settled, just to rattle him so he could never relax. And they were like, if we treat him like this and we really kind of make him suffer, he'll sing eventually. He'll start talking. He'll start giving us names. Not sing like, Let It Go from Frozen in his cell. I'm talking about the kind of singing where you just give up names of people who have been involved in crime. So different kind of singing, not really a karaoke event, but you know what I'm trying to say. For the next 29 months, he spent 24 hours a day in a 6x8 cell, and the prison guards would taunt him, saying things like, that we'll find some dirt on you somehow, you'll never leave this place. Just at the point where he was at rock bottom, his luck began to change for the better when one of the more humane prison guards dropped a Bible into his cell. He studied the book from cover to cover and began to change his mentality. Eventually, the guards who taunted him were proved wrong, and Franzese was released at the end of his sentence in 1995. The way he talks about his experience in solitary confinement today is really interesting. He doesn't say he was in a cell in a room on his own. He says, I was in a 6x8 cell, 24/7, just me and God. One of his first career moves after prison was not a move he ever expected to make. He began to pursue a career in public speaking. While he was still in prison, he was requested to give a talk to athletes from professional baseball, basketball, football and hockey. In exchange for his speech, he was allowed to go outside onto the prison yard for exercise. He educated the athletes about the kind of traps the mob could get you involved with, and the dangers of the sports gambling business in general. Something that Michael saw as a one-time deal to get some fresh air on the yard went down extremely well. So well, in fact, that he began to receive offers from other organisations once he was released. This included a request to speak at his local church, which led to speaking engagements at multiple locations across the United States. 25 years on from his first speech, he now gives life coaching talks, religious talks, on top of speaking to prisoners about how to deal with life both in prison and advice on what to do when they get out. Since 2003, he's written 4 books, which are all available on his website, michaelfranzese.com, so go and check those out. Most of the research for this video I got straight from the horse's mouth, not to be confused with the horse's head, that's very different. He's got his own YouTube channel where he discusses everything from the mob to business to religion, life advice, books, it's all there. So if you're a fan of good storytelling, I'm sure you'll love his channel, so go and subscribe to it and check out his videos. And while you're here, subscribe to this one as well. Can't believe I plugged someone else's channel before I've actually plugged mine. Don't know what's going on there, but most importantly, subscribe to mine. Thanks for watching Loose Cannon TV, and we'll see you next time.